Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 2 of the anime series Boku Dake ga Inai Machi, or Erased. And man, just, I'm finding it so hard to really relate to anybody in this show, to really be invested in anything. I mean, they hardly talk about anything that I find interesting. In part, they talk about a few things that I found interesting. Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, and such. In case you missed it, that was a joke. A time travel series, butterfly effect, timey-wimey stuff, and the mentality of this character there's a murder mystery and a kidnapper, murderer thing to be tracked down, all this kind of stuff, time travel. And then you got references like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. It's almost like, was this expressly written for me? Because I loved it. I loved the entire second episode. And in retrospect, I loved the first episode that much more, especially after all the discussions on that video I had in the comments with viewers and such like that, fleshing out where they could go and everything. And I feel like I put forth a misconception in why I was upset with the first episode. It wasn't like I wasn't thinking 3 steps ahead, like, oh, he's gone into the past, we might see his mother again and all that kind of stuff. What really super disappointed me, which I was trying to put across in that first impressions video for episode 1, was the excitement I had in the idea that his mother was ready to tell all. She had finally come to the conclusion they made a mistake so many years ago. And here we were going to see mother and son working together to crack this mystery. And of course, she's robbed of her life, and we're robbed of that potential aspect of the story, at least in the modern place setting. I didn't expect that he could time travel. He's talking about only time traveling like, 1 to 5 minutes into the past. Suddenly he's back in the 80s. He's a kid again, and he's still got his present day awareness after the loss of his mother. It hadn't occurred to me at that point, like, oh, well, maybe we could still see that happening after a fashion in the past. He could confide in his mother. And I was afraid also that, her character was so likable in the present, and people change over time, so that, like, his going into the past, being a kid, if he were to bring these elements up, if somehow you were to try to communicate this to his mother, I was afraid she'd become abrasive and unlikable. Like, I'm not going to listen to my kid who's talking about this stuff, but I was completely, allayed of any of those worries, because when we see her in the past, she's awesome mom. Like, she's my favorite character still. Satoru actually is borderlining that as well, because he has a couple snarky quips having to deal with this newfound surrounding that he finds himself in, trying to regain his familiarity with, like, I don't remember where I sit in class and who my friends are and what we all talk about, what our interests are. He's like zoning out about, oh, we're not going to the clubhouse, during winter. We said that like yesterday. He's like, oh, did we? All these things. It was absolutely hilarious. And I love that, like, especially with the mother character, for all intents and purposes, he skips out on school. Like, I don't know if that was the end of the day or not, but he's like, oh, I'm going to, go to the bathroom or whatever. And he goes home, and the mother isn't home. She's at work. But when she returns home, I don't know if she knew he skipped out or not, but she doesn't scold him at all. She's happy to see him, and actually asking him, what do you want for dinner? Burgers, meatballs? Letting him decide and having whatever he wants made. And that whole dynamic between them later on in the episode, when he's talking about having a birthday party, it's something surprising to her, but she's actually gung-ho about it. I'm going to make you a cake. Let's have some friends over. We don't have a lot of room. If you limit it to, standing room only, maybe we can do this. And such like that. And so I love that dynamic. And once Satoru has found, that form and function of where he fits in this place, the overhanging question is, why was I sent back? What could be the problem? What do I need to solve? And it's a working effort to piece together, it's the girl Kaio and making friends with her, and he's got one of his buddies setting him up. And, that's where that snark comes in. That made me laugh out loud, where he's like talking to her and like, he's just annoyed with her sort of, not very friendly or amiable fashion. He's like, oh, this kid's a pain in the ass. His modern sensibilities, that this kid's a pain in the ass. And then he echoes that again later when they're talking about, when they met earlier, she's saying, you want to be my friend? Oh, would you kill somebody for me? And he's like taken aback by that. I was taken aback by that. I'm like, okay, maybe there's more going on here, because there are hints of potentially her being abused at home and all this kind of stuff. This heart-wrenching, captivating aspect. And I was thinking, without actually having remembered that they found her body, I had made the assumption that it was a cold case and they never found a body. She had just gone missing and nobody ever knew what happened, but they presumed she was, murdered. I had been thinking maybe she ran away when we had this revelation of there being abuse at home. And I don't know how dark or not they're going to go with that. I mean, for all we know, her mother could be like selling her out to somebody. And that could be whomever eventually kidnaps and murders her. Or it could be that this person is like, Kaio feels is her saving grace. Somebody who promises her, I'm going to rescue you from the hardship you have at home. And she goes along with it, and to her doom, penultimately. But I love that exchange where, he's like, oh, well, I can't kill anyone for you, in their second encounter. And she's like, I was joking. And again, he's like, oh, I hate people like this. So I loved all of that. But I'm really uber captivated because there is this underridden, ominous, foreboding sense where you have this kid, Kenya, who seems to know more about stuff. I don't know if it's just because he read that essay or that book of essays where it is a clear-cut call for help, as Satoru says, as far as Kaio is concerned, what she wrote about, wanting to escape and not be surrounded by friends or family, especially her mother, wanting to just be at peace on her own and all these kinds of things. So obviously she's in a bad situation, and Kenya seems to have perceived that. And he seems to have misconstrued Satoru's interest in Kaio, being that maybe he had read her call for help, her SOS as he calls it, in this essay format. But in actuality, we the viewer know Satoru has come back in time. And he feels like he's piecing it together a little bit further ahead than I was, admittedly, by the end of the first episode. But in subsequently all the discussions I had in the comments with you guys, he is piecing together that if I can figure this out, maybe I can undo the death of my mother. And it's interesting how he's reminded of, like, Airi, and Kaio and Airi have certain things that they're saying similarly and such like that. Again, calling back a little bit on certain fears I had in the first episode, where this was kind of a little bit too close to the mark of the perfect insider. Everything becomes F, the perfect insider. But this is nothing like that. This, especially with this second episode, there's so much interesting characterization. There's so much depth of character. There are so many things I'm relating to. Like I said, man, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest. Okay, these are, later incarnations of those franchises. But I mean, I know and am familiar with the earlier ones. I love that characters are very much in that mindset. And it's something that I can grasp onto, even if there were any, possibility of me not gravitating toward the story. But I'm thoroughly engrossed in the story. And I'm really curious to see what's going to happen. Because, of course, you do see two shots where somebody is looking from afar. Presumably one of them is the actual abductor, kidnapper, murderer. And the other one is that sort of simpleton friend that Satoru, remembers from his past. The one who was falsely accused and imprisoned, seemingly. Or at least that's what his mother later suspected in the first episode, just before her untimely demise. So it kind of has that Scream franchise thing where, they're showing certain characters in potentially ominous light where, do they know something? Are they involved? What's going on? Who is this, that, or the other thing? And one thing I found myself thinking when we see the teacher at that first point where he's like standing in the classroom doorway and he doesn't know where he's supposed to sit down. He's kind of just taken aback that he's been transported so many years back into his past. I thought, like, is the teacher going to be the killer? Because here's the thing. It's winter time, and they're paying a lot of attention to the fact that neither Satoru or Kaio have gloves. and they both feel like, oh, they must have left them somewhere, or they went missing, or something along those lines. And it's just, it's standing out to me like, could this abductor murderer have stolen them? Or somebody who's a benefactor to this person? How do we know one of these kids hasn't been mentally manipulated into doing his dirty work, stealing, things that belong to the kids that will eventually go missing and end up dead, all that kind of stuff. That psychological craziness where I want things that belong to them, and they're edging closer and closer and closer until finally they lay their hands on the person that all these belongings they've stolen have come from. I don't exactly know, but man, is this enthralling and exciting and tantalizing to me. Any sort of fears I had were completely allayed. I love the characterization, as I say. I love the dynamic going on between Satoru and his mother. I love that. I wish we would see more of her, and I'm sure we will as the episodes go on. And I think I even said, like, I hope the whole series doesn't, pinpointedly take place in his past. If I'm to gauge anything by the OP, I think that might actually be the case. But if this is the feeling and the vibe we're going to get from it, I don't mind it at all, actually. I couldn't see it any other way. And it does leave me to wonder, if Satoru is effective in doing this. Whatever they need to do, put this guy to death, figure out the mystery, get the right person arrested and incarcerated, save lives of these kids and everything like that. What is it going to be like for Satoru to find himself snapped back to the future, in a sense? The future from where he finds himself now, but it's very much his present. Is it going to kind of be like the Back to the Future thing, where at the end of the film, Marty McFly wakes up in his house and everything is so much different? People who weren't alive are still alive. Maybe he's married, for all we know, to Kaio. Maybe they had a relationship if he saves her life. And all these kinds of time travel-esque possibilities are suddenly just that much more exciting and extravagant to me. Like, I can't wait to see what they're going to do with this. I had lots and lots of fun going back and forth in the speculation and the clarification comments and such like that on the first episode, review that I put up. So I hope that will continue with this one, speculating on where we think this might go, who we think might be this ominous, murderous benefactor, and do we think Satoru will be able to change time for the better? Will he save his mother's life in the future? Will he set more people at risk in this, past place setting if he starts rocking the boat and all these kinds of things? It seems already like that might be a factor if, in fact, his gloves that have gone missing were taken by whomever this person is, which is my suspicion. I think, both of these kids, because I think in episode 1 they said it was 2 kids who had gone missing and been found, or whatever it was, I guess subsequently had been found murdered. So how do we know that Satoru hasn't now, in his closely, getting closer to Kaio, how do we know that he hasn't shifted the target onto himself? And could that become that much more crazy for him? I don't know. But it's got me mad excited. And if it continues on this level, I can see being with this episodic coverage wise, because damn. So yeah, I'm just going to be expounding about this particular series in this episode, the second episode, ad infinitum, ad nauseum. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of episode 2 of Erased, if you've seen it, if you enjoyed it as much as I did, if you found it as compelling as I did, and if you have, you're rife with speculation as to where this could all go. And if you appreciated those, again, Dragon Quest and frickin', Final Fantasy references and stuff like that. I mean, couldn't have been any more pitch perfect for somebody who loves that kind of stuff like I do. Plus the time travel and everything, like I say. So, pretty perfect second episode. And can't wait to see where it goes. Otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well. And I'll catch y'all later. Peace.